this is Carolyn from All Things EFFY, and I'm here to talk about tufting yarn. Actually, I'm here to talk about yarns in general and do a little bit of education about what's out there and what it can do and what the benefits are of all the different kinds of yarn. The first one I really want to talk about though is this tufting yarn. So this tufting yarn is being sold in many different shops now, and it's affordable. It's very affordable. It comes on cones and it comes in cakes. It can come up to almost, I think some stores sell it as a kg on a cone. If you go to the little pop-up tufting workshop places, generally this is the yarn that they're using. Because it is affordable. I mean, I use it in my workshops too, just because it doesn't break the bank. However, this yarn is marketed generally as 100% acrylic yarn, and it's not. It's 80% cotton and 20% acrylic. And why does that matter? Because acrylic is easier to carve than cotton. Cotton can be a little bit, it's very stringy. This is the best way that I can describe it. It's very stringy and it separates into its strands very quickly. So if I go down like halfway down this strand and if I just pull, it's just going to separate right away. So all those strings, the carving blades struggle to kind of catch them all as it's going across. So you tend to have, it takes a little bit more time to kind of get the structure of your rug when you're using this. There's supposed to be a carver that's coming out that can handle this cotton better, but in my experience cotton is a little bit harder to carve, and while this is affordable and comes in like 92 brilliant shades, there are some drawbacks to this yarn. It also doesn't hold its structure very well. Which, what do I mean by that? So when you tuft, a yarn that doesn't hold its structure kind of falls over and sort of squishes down really easily. So this is the cotton blend tufted, and it's just, it doesn't have much stiffness to it. It just kind of squishes, and yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, it's not going to really make a rug that will last with a lot of heavy foot traffic on it. It's going to just squish down and squish down and squish down until, like, you know, you've just got a little squish layer, just because it just can't hold its structure because it's just not strong enough. However, this is so soft, and I think this stuff, because it's cotton, would make brilliant bath mats, personally. If you use the liquid latex backing, which is essentially just rubber on the back, and this, you could make some epic bathroom mats that would be absorbent but dry quickly. So that's a benefit of cotton. Cotton is very absorbent, but it also dries very fast. Wool is also very absorbent and dries quite quickly as well, but that's why natural fibers are just kind of a little bit nicer that way. So when you see this tufting yarn, it's generally, they're going to say it's either 5-ply or 8-ply. The one I sell is 8-ply because it gives you that about 5mm thickness, which means you only have to use one strand in your tufting gun. So it also reduces the amount of yarn that you have to buy, because when you buy knitting acrylic or any of the other yarns that I'm going to speak about, you generally need 2 to 3 strands in order to create that density. But this one, because it's kind of splays out as you tuft, like you can see, like all those individual fibers are on their own. So it sprays out and creates that plushness automatically. So that's why you can use one strand and it still looks really nice and full and plush. I still find with this that you have to tuft quite densely to get it to give your rug any sort of poofiness. I'm using some weird words here, but basically to keep it from just sagging. Particularly if you're going to use this yarn when you're using the high pile. So this is the high pile with that acrylic, and you can see it just bloop, 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 it doesn't really have much structure to it at all. Whereas the rug wool at the same pile height keeps its structure. So that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. So yeah, anyways, back to this yarn. It is excellent. It's affordable. I sell it. No problem with it at all. Just think it should be marketed as it is, which is 80% cotton and 20% acrylic, just so that people understand what they're buying. But that's just my personal preference as a seller. I like to be as honest as humanly possible. All right, let's talk about pure acrylic now that we've discussed the cotton blend. This is typically what I'd say probably like 70% of the tufters use is knitting acrylic. Just because it's accessible at your local stores, craft stores, it comes in a lot of shades. They're usually quite vivid. People seem to like that. And it's mostly just because it's become the popular fiber for tufting just because it's accessible. So it's not because it's the best, it's just because it is accessible to everybody. And makes complete sense. But let's just take a look at how this fiber would behave in a rug as opposed to what we would call 100% acrylic rug making yarn. So this is a product I'm just bringing into my stores. It's probably going to take like a month to get it in stock and everything, but it's quite different than this knitting acrylic. It's very strong, and it's got a lot more structure to it in comparison to this knitting acrylic. You can see the knitting acrylic just goes woo, which means it's gonna, as you tuft, it's gonna kind of spray out and not hold the shape that you're tufting. This one, I was just so surprised. It just stays straight, like, so if you make a little area, it's gonna just stay nice and plush, and when you walk on it, it feels super, super soft. It's got a little bit of a shine to it, which I didn't maybe 100% love, and I just knocked my camera. So this is the rug that I've made with, I only had a little bit of a sample of this stuff. And you can just see, if I kind of pinch anywhere in the rug to see the fibers, they're all sitting very, very straight. I'll show you actually on a different piece, but this is just to show you like how the finish sort of looks. It's really, I need to finish the carving. The carving's all over the show. But like, it is very easy to carve. However, you want to make sure you keep enough space between color 1 and color 2, because I was kind of going with the approach that I would use with knitting acrylic, and it definitely didn't work with this. I needed to leave a gap, because it just, when they're overlapping, like with knitting acrylic, if they're overlapping, you can generally sort of kind of put your scissors through and sort of straighten the fibers. But I found it really difficult to do with this because it was like they were already straight up, so I was almost like had two fibers like on top of each other. So yeah, leave some area to create some definition between your shapes with this acrylic. The rosewood carver works well with this acrylic yarn, and the CPI works well. Sheep shears, I tried everything on it. That's why the carving's a little bit wonky, but I just wanted to make sure all the tools worked with it. So yeah, basically, if you look at, we'll take a closer look at the structure of this yarn. So you can see how the fibers just stay super straight, and there's no, like, they can bend over, but there's no sagging the same way there is with the knitting acrylic. It's got, and it also means that like once it's tufted, when you step on it, it doesn't squish down. It's like kind of like feels like stiff under your feet, but also soft, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's just different. If you're used to using this, you enjoy it, you carve easily with it, that's fine. Just stick with that. This is just a different product to create 100% acrylic rugs that have a lot more durability and will last a lot longer. A rug made with this, if it's walked on, it's really not going to last very long at all. It's going to squish down and it's going to become basically like a pancake over time. This rug here that I made, the only reason it still looks so nice is because I haven't put it on the ground. But yeah, this is 100% acrylic knitting yarn that I used here. That was like one of the first rugs I made. So that's basically the difference between acrylic for rug making versus acrylic for knitting. And again, I'm not telling you which to use, this is just an informative video about what is out there. So then we come to wool. Oh, my favorite thing in the world. I know that not everybody loves wool. Not everybody is a fan, and that's okay. I love wool, and I love rug wool, especially for punch needling and tufting. It is just fan-freaking-tastic. It's very different from knitting wools. So knitting wools you'll find in your local craft store, particularly here in New Zealand and Australia. When I went back to Canada, I was surprised at how little knitting wool there was available, so that was a bit sad. But then again, I also remember when I came to New Zealand, I was so surprised at how much wool there was to play with. So yeah. So again, looking at the structure of the fiber, I'm just going to snip this one because it's kind of got a... So we'll look at the structure. You can see, again, you get the same... Well, this actually stays up pretty good. I'm actually surprised by that. But this is a lot softer, so it's going to squish down a lot more, whereas this one's got a lot more strength when it's tufted. The same way I was discussing about the acrylic rug yarn. Also, the one thing to note is wools are all different. So knitting wools typically tend to be the softer wools and have a finer micron. That's something that you can look for if you're trying to understand you know, what you're using. It's got a finer micron. It's generally softer. It's made so that you can knit it, you can crochet it, and you can make it into soft little things to put next to your skin that won't be super itchy. This knitted is not going to feel great. It's not going to feel great at all, because that's not what it's meant for. The structure, this outside of the fiber part is not what's important to this. It's how it tufts and creates that nice top that then you can walk on. But it also holds its structure when it's tufted. So rug wool is typically sourced from New Zealand, because we have about, I looked it up the other day. I think it's a ridiculous, it's millions and millions, like triple our population and cheap. So it generally comes from New Zealand, where our sheep are treated really, really well. I've got a big blurb about it on, like, under the listing for my rug wool, if you want to learn more about New Zealand wool and why it's so good, and why the sheep just make the best wool here because of the climate and because of the space that they have to roam and the food that they're eating, you know, the grass that they're eating. It's just, yeah, it's just different. So usually it'll be sourced from New Zealand. It is usually 100% Romney, because Romney has a much higher micron count than, say, Merino. Merino's probably the wool that most people have heard about for being as soft as humanly possible. Like Merino clothing, like Icebreaker, it's absolutely gorgeous next to your skin, and that's the point of it. But rug wool, it's not meant to be next to your skin, it's meant to make a nice sturdy rug. The other aspect of wool, knitting wool, using knitting wool for tufting is going to add up really, really fast. you're looking at like almost $18 for 100 grams now in some of the wools. Whereas this rug wool, that's a 500 gram cone, and it's not in a skein, it's on a cone, and it's going to be about $10 per 100 grams at regular price. If you can get bulk order it, then you can bring the cost down even to like $5 or $6 per 100 grams. So it's much more affordable if you can source it sort of within your country as opposed to having to pay overseas shipping. Then it, that changes things. But anyways, knitting wool, not the best idea to use. If you want to use it, go for it. It's expensive, not meant for tufting. Don't really see the point, personally. I guess if you're looking for a specific color, that might be why. I just find like mixing fibers in a rug just looks kind of weird. I like to have all the same sort of type of yarn when I'm making a rug. I want it to all be the same kind. So yeah, that's knitting wool. And then let's look at the structure of rug wool. So I was showing before when I was talking about the cotton blend, how it just sort of it's just nice and shaggy, whereas this is the rug wool and all the tufts stay nice and straight. So here, this was done with the AK3, and it's generally nice and straight. You always have like one straggler here and there, but when it's also short, ooh, that was definitely with the AK3. I've got so many long strands in there, but yeah, it's just really nice straight tufts. Looks gorgeous. And the thing is that while that part of the fiber feels really scratchy and stiff, when it's tufted, do you see how it sort of splays a bit? Just on the top, not throughout the whole entire fiber, but just at the top, and it feels so soft to walk on. Like, I think many customers who buy this, they feel it and they're like, oh my god. But when it's tufted, cut pile, it feels so good. It also works really well for loop pile. It doesn't feel maybe quite as soft under the feet with loop pile, but with loop pile it holds its structure so well, so it creates really nice loops. Again, loop pile is even harder to get that structure, so definitely the acrylic rug wool or the acrylic rug yarn or rug wool will be the best for loop pile, definitely. This kind of stuff, the knitting acrylic is, the loops are all gonna kind of get squishy. So again, it's just about structure. It's about the structure of your rug. And until you really play around with all these different fibers, it's really hard to kind of understand. But hopefully this is giving you just a little bit of insight into the different tufting yarns that are available and why some are better than others, and mostly just the differences. So yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any. I guess there's also some yarns that I don't have here. There's banana silk, which I think is a great addition to tufting with wool. Like, so if you add a strand of banana silk into your wool, you get this nice shine, which is quite gorgeous. I personally don't like shiny rugs because this knitting or this rug acrylic is quite shiny. It's not my personal preference, but everybody has different preferences. So banana silk, you'll see a lot of those, with like rugs in stores that have that little bit of shine to them, and that's usually some banana silk mixed in, or even silk. But yeah, I guess it depends on where you're shopping for rugs. So I haven't tried banana silk. I don't know what it's like to carve. I don't know what it's like to tuft with. I don't know much about it at all. What else is there? There is also cotton, obviously 100% cotton as opposed to the 80% cotton. Cotton, again, I think I've discussed quite a bit that in this video already. It is very hard, or it's not very hard, it is harder to carve. I find that I end up using scissors more than an actual carver when I'm carving this cotton, just because of the stringiness of it. It's just very stringy, and that's the only reason. I was told by a customer that you can use the CPI with it. The CPI seems to work quite well. And I guess that's just because it's a big flat plate as opposed to a bunch of prongs, like trying to go through something. It's just one solid blade. But I would imagine you have to go back and forth quite a few times to get that really even finish. And that's the thing you'll find with when you're trying to carve this, is like it just takes time to like kind of get a nice smooth finish with it. Yeah. So I think that covers most of what's out there. I'm sure that there's, you know, if you're a professional tufter, I'm sure there's a million things that you could tell me that I've missed, but I'm doing this from the perspective of a home tufter, not a professional rug maker tufter, and trying to make the best rugs that you can in your own home. So the other thing about all these wools is, I think I talked about how this is about 8 ply, this cotton is about 8 ply, and you only need to use 1 strand in your tufting gun, which it makes it easier for buying, and it, like when you purchase the yarn, because you don't need to buy 2 of everything. It also just, it's more affordable. This is like at most $13 per 200 grams. And if you then think about, so that's 200 grams. If you were using acrylic, so just to compare, acrylic is going to be about I think the cheapest I've seen is about $4 per skein. And usually each skein is 100 grams. So if you think about $4, and to get to 200 grams of this knitting acrylic, then you need to multiply that by 2. So you have $8 for 200 grams. However, you need to use 2 to 3 strands at a time tufting to fill up your area. So what is that going to mean? Now we're multiplying that 200 by 2 again to make 400 grams. So then you're looking at about $16 for 4 skeins that make up what this can do with just one cake. This also comes on, I don't know if I already mentioned this comes on cones, and it comes up to, I think, I like to sell it in 200 grams, because then, you know, you just have a little bit for those little spurts of color. But it does come in like 400 gram cones, and I think some stores even sell it on like a 1 kg cone. But yeah, I just find that with my customers, less is preferable. Just so that you're not overbuying a huge amount. Unfortunately, the rug wool at the moment, I am working to find a way to get the same sort of style rug wool, but on 250 gram cones again. It's just a bit of a struggle, because as tufting's gotten more and more popular, the factories don't want to be producing, you know, different size cones for different customers. They just want to be producing these 500 gram cones and just cranking them out. It's unfortunate, because when I started, it was, you know, my business, it was a lot different. I could get a lot of customization at the same price, and you know, now I'm a bit more limited with what I can and cannot buy, just because you guys have all made it so popular. So that's not a bad thing. So yeah, the rest of the yarns, so again, this one, you only need 1 strand in your tufting gun. The other yarns are essentially, if we look at the knitting yarns, so that's knitting acrylics, the blue, yellow's the knitting wool, pink's the rug yarn, and purple's the rug acrylic. So keeping my brain straight here. They're all double knit. So double knit is kind of, I think, the global term. I'm not a knitter, so I get a bit confused with this. This double knit is kind of a standard size yarn for knitting, and I think it's like, yeah, like 4 to 4.5 millimeter knitting needles. So double knit 8 ply. This 8 ply thing, just to clarify, I know that some of my customers are in North America and Europe. In New Zealand and Australia, for some reason, we've decided that double knit is 8 ply. So 8 ply actually means double knit yarn. It doesn't mean it has 8 plies to it. So you can see that this yarn actually has 8 plies, but it's 5 millimeters, which means it's actually a chunky yarn. So just because we say 8 ply doesn't mean there's actually 8 strands in these yarns to make up the structure. This one is about, I think it's only 4 strands wound together. You'll also find that acrylic's wound a bit tighter than cotton. Cotton kind of splays apart really easily, whereas this is a little bit more tightly wound. This is even more tightly wound. And the rug wool is also very tightly wound. This rug wool is 3 ply, so it's got 3 individual plies that are wound together to make up the structure of the yarn, and they're pretty hard to undo. So in home tufting, we basically kind of tried to stick to the double knit because it's basically 2 strands of all of these yarns is going to make a nice dense rug and will fit beautifully through the tip of your tufting gun. In traditional rug making, and this is why it's been so hard for me to get this acrylic rug yarn, because generally the acrylic for rug making is like a single ply, so it's very, very fine, and then you use like 8 or 9 cones together. Well, that's ideal. That's very hard as a home tufter to buy 8 cones of the same yarn or make 8 cakes of the same yarn to then pull through into your gun, and to keep that consistency of all those strands is very difficult. Similarly with wool, wool's generally is thinner wool is used in tufting and for like in tufting factories. It's going to be usually a single ply, very fine, and they're just going to be using like 8 or 9 strands together. It creates a really beautiful loopy look, and it creates, you know, it creates a much denser rug. If the more strands you have that are being tufted, the denser the rug is going to be. It's just how it goes. So you won't see that same separation between each strand like you see here when you have 8 coming up to make up that one single strand. It's sort of like how the cotton looks. So the cotton separates when you tuft it, so you get that dense look with really only putting, like, I think that's 4 tufted lines, and it's, you know, it looks very full. So if that's something that you're concerned about, you want to really go to like the next professional level, you're going to have to try and source single ply, you know, acrylics or single ply wools, which can get very pricey. So that's the only reason for home tufting we've sort of stuck with a double knit in the industry, just because it just 2 strands, it makes a pretty nice dense rug. So let's just take a little look at the rug wool tufted. So it's, sorry, this is a bit dirty. I need to run my thing over it, but it's really soft. But you can still see sort of the structure of each strand, even when it's carved. Whereas if you were doing it with like lots of little strands, you probably wouldn't get that same sort of definition of the fibers. So yeah, I think that just about covers it all. I'd love if you have questions about wools, yarns, anything that you've chosen to tuft with and you want to understand more about it, just shoot me a message. I'm always happy to try and talk people through things and to figure out what the best product is for you. Just as this is quite affordable yarn, this is also going to be very, very affordable, this rug acrylic. So it will be basically the same price as per 100 grams as knitting acrylic. So this way you can choose to use this without having to increase the amount you're spending at all. And that I was really focused on making that possible, because obviously this is what a lot of people use, and to compete with it and to provide a rug yarn that can compete with that price-wise, I had to, yeah, it's just taken me a long time to figure that out, but I'm really excited about this. Again, it's a bit shiny, but some people like that. I just like how plush it is for tufting. Like, it just, woo, look at that. It's just so straight and so perfect. It just, yeah, I love it. Yeah, so I'll probably post this on YouTube, so feel free to send me a message or write a comment or whatever if you have any questions about the different yarns, and if you have any questions about what you're using. And I hope that I made it quite clear what this tufting, this 8-ply tufting yarn really is, so that everybody kind of knows what they're getting into when they're buying this yarn, because it's just really frustrated me that a lot of suppliers are trying to write it off as 100% acrylic when it's not. And it's only made in one factory, so it's not like it's like they can be buying it from somewhere else and trying to make it like, yeah, it's made in one place. It's 80% cotton. That is that yarn. Acrylic is just different, and wool is different again. So all fibers are different and behave differently, and what they are made for in terms of, say, for knitting a jersey versus making a rug, those are two very different things. So there's going to be different fibers for the different types of crafts that you want to do. One thing about this cotton, excellent for crochet. It's absolutely beautiful for crocheting. I don't do a lot of crochet. I've done a bit of it, but it's absolutely beautiful for crochet. Cool. And I'll see you guys in the next video.